Hello, I'm Mamiya. Welcome to my YouTube channel, and in this series we'll talk about adapting EF lenses or 35mm lenses to the Fuji GFX 100S or any other GFX for that matter. In one of the recent videos I was asked to review the Canon EF 100 f2.8 Macro L lens, and since I don't have the lens, it's a bit of a problem for me to review it, but I did had the lens for about a week just to try it out. I decided not to buy it, spoiler alert, and I will explain why I decided not to buy it. Although it's quite a nice lens, it can do many things, but it didn't fit my specific bill, my specific use case. I don't have many sample images, and I didn't had the lens when I was asked to review it, so I couldn't do things that I used to do in reviewing lenses. But since information about EF lenses on the GFX is so scarce around the internet, I decided to try my best and take a look at the sample images that I do have. And just for the sake of science, it's my GFX 100S that films me, and the lens is the Canon 45 f1.8 at about f2.2, if I remember correctly, using the IAF on AFC. So you can see how it goes. But most of the video will be a screen share, so even if it fails completely, it won't be that bad. Let's take a look at the sample images and see what the Canon 100 f2.8 Macro L lens can do. Okay, so this looks like the most boring photo, but it was taken at f2.8. It's just a matte on a work desk, and we can see the vignette at f2.8. It's not one-by-one focusing, it's a bit further away, but we can see the darker edges. Let's see if we can correct them in the lens correction module. Let's take the manual correction and see how it goes. I think it goes quite well. And let's try the profile. Always go to the 16, I don't know why. Okay. Now let's take the vignette a bit off. Doesn't fix as good as the manual correction, but it is what it is. It's not intended for this kind of use case. This is how it looks at f5.6 without the correction. So we see the vignette are almost completely gone and will be easily corrected in manual with just a slight motion of the slider. And let's take a look at the details. So it doesn't look completely sharp. It's on 1:40, and to the best of my recollection, I haven't worked with the optical image stabilizer, which might work a bit better. So we see slight motion blur in the image, but all in all, it seems pretty sharp. If we'll go all the way to the edges, we can see some sort of smear that's a bit more pronounced than the motion blur introduced into the image, and it's something we can expect. So there is somewhat significant image degradations all the way to the corners. So this image was shot at f2.8, but at an extremely slow speed at 1/12 of the second. And we can see that when the focus distance is a bit further away than macro distances, the IBIS works a bit better. We can see the details are relatively okay-ish, not tack sharp, but quite well. And we can see the nice out of focus rendering all the way over here and over here. We can also see the vignette in the corners and a bit of image degradation. A classic macro shot of a leaf at f11 at 1:140 of the second. Let's take a look, and here we see something that looks like motion blur, but in this speed it shouldn't happen. I believe maybe it's something regarding the stabilizer doesn't work or doesn't sync as well as they should. I don't know what happened here, but that is something we should take into consideration. Some stabilized lenses won't work as well with the IBIS, and there won't be any sync. So we need to check them, we need to test them, we need to see what works better, if the IBIS works better, if the OS works better, and give them a shot or several shots to see how it goes. This is a landscape shot at 1 to 250 at f10. We see no significant vignette at focus at infinity or something around infinity, and it's not cropped in any way. So I'll say it's a surprise to me because most lenses performs better in closer focusing distances, but at f10 it seems like this lens performs quite well. Let's take a look at the corners. So here we can see something that's not as sharp as we would expect such a lens, or at least a GF lens at a similar range and scope. But when going to the middle of the frame, we see the lens is quite sharp and actually not as bad for landscape, but bear in mind the corners won't be as sharp as the center of the image at f10, at f11, etc. Here's another close-up with the bokeh balls, and we can see some severe cat's eye bokeh towards the corners. That's on f2.8. Let's take a look at a bit slower aperture. That's on 5.6, and we can see we still get some cat's eye, but not as pronounced. And the bokeh itself does have some aberrations to it, some onion rings, and I don't know where those stripes come from. It could be the subject matter of the image, but it's something that we need to take into consideration. Yeah, I think this rainbowish aberration does not come from the lens, but I can't say for sure. But we can definitely see some aberrations in the bokeh balls, but all in all, it looks nice. It's acceptable. Here we can see a portrait. It is cropped, so when we will uncrop it, we'll see the dark vignette edges, and we can see some swirliness around the edges of the frame. But the middle of the frame is rather sharp. We can see very fine details all around what's in focus, and the rendering to the out of focus areas is quite pleasant, at least in my opinion. Here's another one at f2.8 at portrait focus distances, and the vignette is quite severe. Let's try and fix it a bit. So if we're fixing it, it goes a long way, and just the slightest crop will do. And here we go. Almost no vignette, and the vignette that we do have is mostly correctable in post, at least at f2.8. Now, if this image looks special to you, that's because it's a scanned slide, scanned with the Fuji GFX 100S and the Canon 100 f2.8 L macro blah 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 blah. It was shot at f5.6 on a repro stand, a very heavy and robust repro stand. So let's take a look at this scan and see what we have. First of all, let's open up the crop. It was shot in some sort of slide that I use. So we do have slight crop. Okay. Let's take a look at the details. I think the first thing we can see is how the Hasselblad 500 CM with the Zeiss 80 f2.8 are not nearly as sharp as modern optics and modern sensor. This is straight in focus, and the camera is on the table, so it doesn't move, though the exposure is quite slow, and it's not nearly as sharp as digital files from cameras much lesser than the GFX 100S. The colors looks quite nice, at least in my eyes. We won't test the bokeh, but we can see the actual grain on slide film. It was a 100 ISO or ASA. I think it was a Velvia, but not sure about that. It was shot a long time ago. So we can see the Fuji renders quite nicely. But if we go to the corners, and bear in mind it's not the corners of the frame, it's just the corner of the square crop of the frame, I think we can already see some degradations. This is the frame, the scanner frame, and it's not quite sharp. So that's something to bear in mind if you intend to use this lens to digitize or scan film. Here's another, I think it's a Triax 400. Let's take a look. So here we can see the rougher, bigger grain of the 400 film. This is not the sharp part, but we can see the grain extremely sharply and some specks of dust. So that assures us that the lens was in focus when I digitized the image. We can of course work on those specs, but it's not what this review is intended for. Let's see the in focus part of the image, and we can see how long technology has taken us since the days of the magnificent Hasselblad 500 and the Zeiss 80 f2.8, but they're not nearly as sharp and as detailed as modern cameras. Something to bear in mind, and film is getting expensive in recent years. So maybe digital is no longer that much more costly than film photography, but I'll leave that to you. I don't want to go into this kind of argument. I know the internet. In this image, like the former one, we can see some degradation. Let's take a look at the scanner frame. In the relative middle of the frame, you can see it's relatively sharp, and the further away we go, we see it's not as sharp as it used to be. I'm talking about the little black line in here. Not as sharp, so not ideal, at least in my standards, for film scanning. The last one is a 4x5 scan. We can see, even without getting into the image, we can see the amazing amount of details the 4x5 does give us. And I think 4x5 and above are some territories that digital photography is having a hard time to get into. But let's take a look at the specific image. So we see plenty of details, very rich image. And we can spot the fine grain of a 100 ISO or ASA 4x5. I don't recall which specific one is it. Probably some sort of Triax or Timax. And we can see that even in the lower parts of the image, it looks fairly well. But if we'll go all the way to the corners, we can see the line here and the line here, and just not the same. It's not as sharp, and as we go further away to the corners, it's getting softer and softer. So this is mainly why I didn't buy that lens. I think it's excellent for portrait shooting. I think it's very nice for day-to-day medium tele shooting. I think f2.8 on GFX gives excellent depth of field, but to its intended purpose as a macro lens, I would much prefer, let's say, a Pentax or a Mamiya 120 f4 or a Hasselblad one. And if you're filthy rich, just go to the Fuji 120 f4. It will probably be the best. But for film scanning and classic macro shots, I would go for an older 645 lens. In my opinion, it gives much better results, and you don't have to worry about what's going on in the corners. So in this regard, I find it hard to recommend the Canon 100 f2.8 Macro L lens to adapt to the Fuji, at least not as a technical macro lens. I think there are much better options. Not AF, not as light, and certainly not as cheap. But for classic technical macro, I would look elsewhere. And that's it. I hope this tiny bits and pieces of information helped any of you to get smart and educated decision about this lens. Share, like, subscribe, and keep following the next videos to come. Goodbye.